Welcome to this very special edition of Community Conversations today. What we want to do is kind of have a discussion that's going to focus on the solid waste industry and how there's been some difficulty over the years regarding recycling, the diminished capacity in the industry to take on the trash that we're producing, and as a result, the increased costs there. So the City of Concord has been really fortunate not really having to deal with these challenges for the past few years thanks to its locked-in solid waste contract. But that could change when the city enters a new contract after the current one expires in June of 2024. So we decided to bring in some folks here who might be able to help us kind of understand the situation as it is now and what we can think about as we go into this kind of 18-month period as we look at that contract expiring. So I want to welcome here, we've got our Solid Waste Advisory Committee Chair and Ward 7 Councilor, Councilor Keith Nyan. We've also got Solid Waste Advisory Committee member, Councilor, and Ward 1 Councilor. I don't want to dismiss the people of Pennacook. So Ward 1 Councilor Brent Todd. We've also got Concord General Services Director Chip Chesley and our Concord General Services Administration Division Manager Adam Clark. So why don't we kind of start the discussion around the challenges that solid waste industry has recently been facing. So Councilor Nyan, could you kind of provide an overview of how things have been shifting with recycling and how that's affected communities like Concord and other area communities?
Sure, absolutely. What I'd like to start off is by saying back in 2014, 8 years ago, when the city signed its last solid waste contract, it's very noteworthy that municipalities were being paid for their recyclable products. That dynamic has completely shifted, and the primary driver of that was in 2017, China's national sword policy really cracked down on the types of materials, solid waste materials that were being imported into China, which is where our primary markets were, primarily because of contamination in plastic bags and other types of plastics, where that market has dried up. So communities are no longer benefiting from revenue streams associated with recyclables, but now are actually paying to dispose of those recyclable products.
Interesting. So Adam, what kind of prompted China to do this? Why did they crack down on the things that we're accepting for recycling?
Yeah, well, people I think really need to understand at the onset that recycling is a global market. So our commodities, our recyclable commodities that are collected throughout the city are eventually sorted out and sent it to other countries around the world. And so what was happening is within the materials that we were sending to China, for example, there was high contamination rates, right? So we had plastic bags that was getting embedded into the paper products that we were sending out. And China said, nope, we're not going to take this anymore. And part of that was, your consumers didn't necessarily know what was recyclable and they were tossing those materials in. Sometimes it would be malicious, but generally it was what we refer to as wish cycling. So individuals would say, okay, I want to recycle, I want to do good, I'm going to put this in the bin. And then, so when it gets sorted out at the materials recovery facility, the perfect example is plastic bags. Plastic bags share a lot of the similar characteristics with paper. So when they're sorting it out and they're using the mechanized engineering processes to do that, those characteristics mean that plastic is going to end up with that paper. And so when you're pulping that paper and trying to make new paper out of it, you're going to end up with a lot of plastic, and that doesn't make a good paper product.
No, nor do those greasy pizza boxes.
Absolutely.
Right? I think I've been guilty of wish cycling
Sure.
those every once in a while. So, so the wishful recycling, wish cycling is one problem. Councilor Todd, what are some other challenges in the industry that the communities are facing?
Well, certainly the recycling, as Keith and Adam already pointed out, is an issue going forward. There's also the issue of the commodities market and the prices that are willing to be paid for certain items. But if we take the recycling out of it and we just look at the solid waste piece, that also faces challenges of increased costs because you've got just the things that are affecting all of us out there. So increase of gas costs, That certainly is a big factor. Hard to find labor, and then labor costs have gone up also over the years. So those are all challenges that creep into every community that has to deal with solid waste, including Concord. So looking forward, we're thinking about how to best approach those challenges going forward. The ultimate goal is to try to put as less of a burden on the community in terms of the cost they'll have to pay as possible.
Interesting. And I'd imagine too that there's, you talk to the gas, that there's fewer places that have landfills now and incinerators because of other environmental regulations. So just finding a place to get rid of waste, I imagine, is an issue.
Well, that's right. Yes. I can add to that. In fact, there was an article recently in the Concord Monitor that described that in pretty good detail, where there were a couple of issues that I thought were interesting. One of them was that it showed that of the 9 facilities in New Hampshire in the state that accept waste, 6 of those accept municipal waste, so basically the trash from communities. And 3 of those are set to sunset. In other words, they're going to reach their capacity within 12 years or less. So we have a real problem. And then there are some other issues that face Concord. So for example, we can't use all those facilities. Some of them are designated for certain communities. So that's really ultimately where we're looking ahead much further and thinking, that we need to be able to do something within our community to help reduce the amount of waste to the extent possible. The less that we put into the landfill, the better for the environment, but also the better for us in terms of our pocketbooks.
So Councilor Todd's already alluding to it a little bit, but Chip, really what it comes down to is, what does it mean for Concord? That's what I think most people are going to wonder here. What does all these large-scale things happening in the solid waste industry mean for Concord in particular?
Well, I think, as said very early in the program, our current contract was based upon pricing in 2014. As I sit here, I can't remember what I paid for a gallon of gasoline in 2014. I can't remember what I paid for a dozen eggs in 2014. I use the example of a dozen eggs, as I do remember going out over the Christmas holiday season. Well, you go out and get some eggs. I'm doing some baking, that routine. And I went and I picked out a dozen eggs, and I was surprised. The first dozen I picked up, of course, was the most expensive, was close to $7. And I said, wow. So I found the $5 brand and then went home. But we've been lulled in a sense that we've been living in a 2014 trash economy. And now we're going to, in 18 months, come up to the current economy. And that is a huge step. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do during the next 18 months, understand that we have a huge step. Speaking earlier, it's somewhat similar to the landlord coming to tell you that your rent used to be $500 a month. And now we've got a new year coming up. It's now going to go to $600 or $700 a month. So there's some parallel to that our rent's going to increase. The good news is usually the landlord shows up a month before your current lease expires and tells you that news. We're trying to get out ahead of this 18 months in advance. So each of us in our individual families can take those steps that are necessary to try to reduce waste as much as we can to prepare for that new trash economy that we will be facing.
That makes an awful lot of sense, that it's been 10 years since we really looked at this. And as any of us know, the last couple of years, inflation has definitely reared its head.
Chip, it's actually kind of a good place to jump in. I know we keep talking about what can we do as a community, and it's really what can we do as individual producers of trash or individual producers of recyclables, knowing that these markets are fluctuating. The number one thing that we can continue to do is to reduce, whether it be reduce what we're putting in the trash stream or reduce what we're putting in the recycling stream. And it means being certainly smart consumers when we buy goods and really recognizing really where those items need to go. You had mentioned before the greasy the greasy pizza boxes.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we can't put those in the recycling stream, but I don't think people know that. I remember when we first started the recycling program, in the back of my mind, oh, it has a recycling logo on the item. And if I saw the recycling logo, it was going into recycling. And those are the kind of things, plastic bags have that recycling logo, certain types of plastics that I think we need to do a better job of educating the community. And we have time to do that about what things can go in recycling. I certainly hope that we can partner with our school district. It's a great resource. I know that when my kids, and again, we're going back a number of years, brought materials home and started talking about what I needed to do, it made a difference. So I'm really hoping that we can partner with our schools to educate families as to what families can do to keep those costs down. One of the good things that I've really enjoyed about the pay-as-you-throw program over the years is that a unit-based pricing program, individuals, families can control how much they pay for trash disposal. The example I gave years ago, and it's probably still appropriate today, although the values have changed, when we implemented the purple trash bag pay-as-you-throw program, the average home value in the city of Concord was $250,000. And the bags were $2 per bag, and you can calculate, and for my family, it was one large trash bag a week, 50 weeks, was about $100. And the cost of the proportionate tax increase that would have had to have covered that was about $104 if you looked at the assessed value of the home. So we made a decision as a family of, okay, this is really going to work for us, but we need to limit what we are putting in the trash and the recyclables. And I remember at the time we had 2 kids in diapers, and we were still able, with an aggressive effort, to only use one trash bag per week. And we've gone away from that over the years because we've become lazy. So this is a great opportunity to refresh our minds, refresh ourselves as to what we should be doing and what we can do.
True. And I guess for some folks that aren't familiar with pay-as-you-throw, I know some people are renters and probably have dumpsters, but might become a Concord resident.
Sure.
After what is the pay-as-you-throw program?
Sure.
How does that work?
Well, first of all, I think we need to get Adam's video from 8 years ago when he put on a tie-back suit and started sorting trash for everybody.
It's a Concord TV classic.
Yeah, Concord TV classic. But and I'm sure you had much longer and darker hair then, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry. I'll get to your question.
So what is the pay-as-you-throw program? How does that work? What is it, basically?
So please step in and help me out. The actual the formula behind it has changed over the years, but in essence, individuals pay for purple trash bags. Currently, help me out, $2.50 per bag.
$2.50 for a large bag and $1.25 for a small bag.
Those bags are designed. These are the purple bags that you see in the community. They are designed to have weight thresholds so that people like to complain about the poor quality of the bags. Well, it's a poor quality bag because they're designed to rip at a certain point based upon the weight. Basically, what families put in those trash bags, they pay for. They're not paying for, so if a family is aggressive about recycling, diverting the recyclables, they're only paying for that trash. By contrast, if we were to spread the trash increase out uniformly across all taxpayers, there's no incentive for the family with, how do I say it the right way? Certain families are not going to recycle. So why should my family have to pay more for someone else's wasteful or improper habits? It's no different than water usage that we've talked about over the years, which is we all pay for our own water consumption. I don't have to pay for the water consumption of a large business that is using significantly more than an average home. It's a way of controlling your own costs. And I'm sure there's more that people want to add, but it's in essence, it's a unit-based pricing mechanism.
Yeah, I think generally I would describe it as exactly that, a unit-based pricing mechanism which provides a financial incentive for those to recycle, because you're paying for your trash bag, you're paying for that unit, and everything that you recycle in the city goes away for free. So if you can minimize that, the contents of your trash bag and use less trash bags, then you're gonna recoup that financial incentive.
And I would add to that too that we have the statistics that show that this program has really worked. And that as a result of that, residents have actually saved money because since the program started, Pay As You Throw, the amount of solid waste that's gone into the waste stream has been reduced by 40%.
That's correct.
So is that right, Chip?
That's
So
correct.
40%. So we've 40% less trash we're generating in Concord now than we did before Pay As You Throw. So that, as you can imagine, that's for those who, again, and I'm one of them, think about the environment. I mean, that's terrific because we're putting less into the landfill. So that's a big help. We are moving more into the recycling, and a lot of those materials do get reused and recycled. And so that is a benefit to our society as a whole, just from the environmental aspect. But then, of course, there's a cost savings, which is really beneficial, and that's what people usually want to look at, and I don't blame them. I do, of course, as well. And so those are all the factors I think kind of roll together that tell us that indeed it's important for us to continue with the pay-as-you-throw program, that's the most advantageous. As Keith pointed out, it's really the best because you have control.
Yes.
The resident has control about how much they're going to spend. If you have, like your example within your families, we get together and we can decide, you know what, we really have to make an conscious effort to try to reduce this however we can. Let's think of some creative ways to do that. And there's all sorts of composting and other methods out there to reduce the food waste trash that you're creating, which is a huge portion of that amount of trash. I think that about 1/3 of all the trash that is generated in the United States is food waste, or something like that.
And I would actually speculate, Brent, that over the next 18 months when the new contract is going to go into effect, there'll be plenty of opportunity just to try to figure out how to help families divert some of that food waste out of the trash program. We know in other communities there have been, certain haulers or collectors who will pick up food scraps. Probably a fact that may not be remembered by all Concord residents, but I remember my dad telling me there used to be a piggery in Concord up on Ironworks Road, and someone would go around each Monday morning, same day as your trash, and pick up the food scraps.
Right.
Obviously, we don't have a piggery in Concord anymore, but there is still communities who are collecting food scraps and trying to make a way to divert some of that. So I think the next 18 months are going to be very challenging and very interesting as to how we try to figure this out. It's probably a good point for us to say the community will have some input into this as well. Knowing our costs are going up, that much we just cannot change. Our costs will go up. Chip, you mentioned at the top of the hour that it's no different. Electricity's gone up, fuel costs, everything is going up. We've enjoyed a contract for 8 years that's been the gold standard of trash collection, not necessarily just in New Hampshire, but possibly the country. Well, we're going to be paying market rate costs. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to explore how we can continue to keep those costs down.
That's excellent. And both counselors kind of refer to it about, controlling how much you throw away and recycling be a part of that, but we've also kind of started out the program saying, well, a lot of people are doing, wish cycling. Are recyclables really being recycled?
Yeah, absolutely. My background was in recyclable marketing before I came to work for the city, so I'm pretty aware of the markets that do exist for these items. We talk about the wish cycling, and one thing that we want to do at the city is get a very robust website together that can guide residents and help them determine, is that recyclable, should that go in the bin, because ultimately that's going to be good for the city. In our new contract and in our present contract, the contamination rate matters, right? So we've recently learned through our efforts to this point that we have a very low contamination rate. Concord does a great job recycling. And so that really helps us as we go into our new contract, because we can point to that and say, hey, we've made efforts and we've made strides getting to a cleaner recyclable stream. So that'll benefit us and has benefited us. And that'll continue to be the case because periodically these companies do audits of the recyclable stream and they say, okay, your contamination rate is too high. We're going to ding you for having too high contamination. And so, if we have a very robust education campaign and resources that can help residents determine what's in fact recyclable and what do we want to include in that bin, that's going to benefit us as a community.
No doubt.
I think picking up on what's been said around the table, two things come to my mind is The day that we launched Pay As You Throw 10 years ago, our trash volumes dropped 40% almost instantaneously. And I spent the rest of that week calling the surrounding communities saying, have you noticed an influx of solid waste at your transfer station that are people in Concord exporting their trash someplace else? And we determined that no, people really had taken the initiative to reduce their waste very quickly, which I thought was very positive when you think about it, because there is that connection. And then during the pandemic, if you
That's a good
recall,
point, Chip. I was going to mention this.
we suspended Pay As You Throw because of the economic hardships we were having.
Right.
And we began to see the trash volumes creep up again. But as soon as that program came to an end and we came back to Pay As You Throw, our trash volumes reduced. So there is an incredibly strong nexus between what you pay and what you produce. And my background is in water resources, and I shouldn't be surprised because in the West, where water is scarce, and it's scarce today, the idea of metering water was developed on the western part of our country, not in the water-rich areas of the East. And the story goes from the old timers that once we started measuring people and telling them how much water they use, even before we started billing them, their consumption started to drop. And then when we started to bill them, then they really took interest in dropping their consumption. And that's what we need to do here in the Northeast. Because as alluded to earlier, there's less and less solid waste capacity in the Northeast. I tell my grandkids who live in Massachusetts that when you're my age, your waste will not be disposed in New England. Of course, they think I'm crazy. But I stand by that because the solid waste capacity in New England is dwindling remarkably quick. So we are going to be in the export business of solid waste. We're in the import business as far as energy, when you think about it. So we're in the export business. So what we want to do is reduce that volume as much as we can. So we have options to compost. We have options to effectively recycle. Not wish cycle, but effectively recycle. And what we need to do as a community is to grab those two things for ourselves and also for our kids moving forward, because that's going to be our new tomorrow. It isn't going to be where I grew up, is that if you could get it to the curb, if you could just get it to the curb, it would magically disappear at no cost. Those days are gone, you know, just like black and white TV is gone. Yeah.
And really you're touching upon some of the long-term challenges that the city is going to have to deal with, not only at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, but as a council and as a community, which is, you know, we're going to deal with transitioning from a gold standard trash collection disposal contract to a market rate contract. And the next big challenge is going to be dealing with, again, at a statewide level, where does the trash go? Is it being exported to Ohio, or is it being exported to a closer community? We don't know what's going to happen. But again, costs are not going to go down. It's something that the sooner we get in front of these costs and develop good practices, we'll have better long-term results. You know, I almost feel that I would be neglect to say, as we deal with these cost increases, what does it look like for Concord's residents? And we can say we don't know as of yet. Knowing the costs are going to go up, we have basically three mechanisms for controlling those costs. Certainly the reduction, control your own usage, control your own costs. But with the additional increases that need to be borne by the city, there's really the only two mechanisms, is either to raise taxes or to increase the price of those purple trash bags. So we're going to be exploring that over the next 18 months, six to 18 months, to figure out how that's going to play itself out. Certainly the community will have a chance to weigh in on that, but it's not going to be an easy process. We know we have to do it, but we'll get through it and make the smartest, most economical decisions that we can.
Fantastic. Actually, Councilor Nyan, I think you wrapped some things up very, very nicely there. I don't know, does anybody have something else they'd like to add? What should the public be anticipating? And I think you've just alluded to it. What should the public be anticipating over these next few months, and what should they be paying attention to?
Well, it's a great question. I guess I'll jump in and then feel free for others to add their own thoughts. at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, we've been talking about this problem for a couple of years now, knowing that we were getting to this point. We're all very much aware that the community is going to want to have some input. There will be opportunities, certainly through public forums, whether it be at a traveling, say, call it a public hearing, meeting at different locations out in the city. There'll be an opportunity, certainly, for residents to share their thoughts with their individual councilors or city staff. Eventually, there'll be a budget vote on how this comes about. But I think it's also incumbent upon the community to engage themselves, to reach out to councilors. But I don't know if you had specific thoughts, Brent, around how that outreach will
Well,
look.
just speaking to what you had mentioned earlier about the educational component also, and it's wonderful, and thanks to Concord TV for having us on and focusing on this particular issue. I think it's something we're going to want to continue in the future. That's another important component of this, that we want to try to, there are certain things that we don't have control over. Again, so if we reference the Concord Monitor article, the recent one, which cited that 45% of the waste that gets disposed of in New Hampshire comes from out of state. So 45%, so we don't have control over all that. That's a state issue. That's a policy issue that needs to be addressed at the state level. But what we have control over is trying to figure out ways where we can educate the public to be able to try to lower the costs for our residents in our community, to be able to come up with additional ways to reduce the amount of waste that we're creating as a community. And that's what's really going to lower the costs. So I would just add that additional point. That
And frankly, the public may have ideas that we haven't even
exactly
thought about yet.
Right.
You know, the redirection of food trash, of food waste is one of those ideas that's relatively new to me that the community's brought forward.
Excellent. Chip and Adam, anything else that you'd like to add?
I think understand that it's not really a local issue, is that we are playing in a regional, national issue. We need to position ourselves. We need to respond. You know, it's now football bowl season. We're playing defense, so we need to respond to how we think the offense is going to come at us. And we need to play smart, and to do that, one thing that you continually said here today is reduce the volume that you're generating. That means that you should only buy 9 eggs, not 12, because you don't want to throw those 3 out, right?
Right. Especially if they're $5 a dozen.
Especially at that price.
Yeah.
So the message for Chip is, when I'm in front of the egg cart and I call Kathy, my wife, is, do you really need all 12 or do you need 6? Because we don't want to throw away 3.
Right.
Because the cost of throwing away 3 is higher now. So what we need to do is think smart and reduce the volume of waste that we're generating on all fronts.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I want to thank all you gentlemen for coming in today and really kind of getting out ahead of this issue. I mean, it's 18 months before we'll actually see the changes taking place, but kind of communicating the issues now, letting people know that we really had a sweetheart deal for a long time, and reality is going to be hitting us. Ways that we can reduce our waste now, ways that we can recycle better in those efforts, are all things that I think the community really benefits from learning now, and hopefully we'll continue to get more information out there in the future. And I know definitely if you check concordnh.gov, they'll be continuing to update on this whole solid waste change process. So thank you all again for being here today. Thank you for watching at home at this episode of Community Conversations, and we'll catch you on the next episode.